NDA?
A non-disclosure agreement.
Okay, so you have a non-disclosure agreement with a lot of entities. They're all working on the basis that you have the rights to do what you say you have the rights to do, that you're the owner of the patents, that you're the one that's in control, and so you all decide that you're going to fire all of the attorneys and all of the people that were working in this matter to try to get to the bottom of it.
Correct. And the investors, Crossbow Ventures and Wayne Huizenga, they were all part of that.
Okay.
And with that, we went to see what these lawsuits were.
Did you hire new counsel at that point?
Yeah, we fired the counsel that we don't even know is representing us. Never heard of them before, because they're really paid by Proskauer because they need to make their loss. Here's what they were planning on doing, it looks like, less, if we read the scam correct. They were going to, Proskauer, they stole the technologies to these companies that look like ours. They then were going to have a lawsuit with Proskauer with this absurd bill of, $600,000 roughly or whatever.
Right.
And then they were going to pull a bankruptcy with Utley and these other guys from Intel, Lockheed, Silicon Graphics through Real 3D, and they were going to pull the bankruptcy on these other fraudulent companies they had set up. And all of the technologies that were in the company that they were illegally transferred to
would become subject
be
to
in
buying.
the bankrupt company as the only asset.
Right.
And then when they folded, when Proskauer sued, they'd have a judgment. They'd go to the bankrupt company and say, "We have a judgment."
And they would own the patents, and they would get the patents as a settlement.
And they would be a part of the patents.
Yeah.
And then they name the
used,
companies, rename the patents.
Yes,
now, part of what we discovered when we went to Harry Modes was that there were these other patents in these companies, like patents for zoom and pan on a digital camera. I mean, imagine the worth of that alone.
Right.
That was written into Brian Utley's name without any other inventors. He wasn't even there. He didn't invent anything.
Right.
So, he couldn't invent him way out of a box.
Yeah. So here, let's go back for a second. Again, I want to clarify to the listening audience. First of all, my guest this afternoon is Eliot Bernstein. Eliot is it's Iviewit Technology, right? Is that what's the actual name of the company? Well, there's
20 companies, but it's Iviewit Holdings, Iviewit Technology.
But Iviewit is IVIEWIT. I guess if people go to Google that, they'll find out a lot about this story.
And at www.iviewit.tv, there's thousands of pieces of evidence. There's the whole story.
Okay, so now what I want to get back to is the collusion between the New York bar and the Florida bar. You fired all these people. Now you hired new attorneys. You go through this, and tell me what the relationship is again between the New York bar and the Florida bar.
We're almost there.
Okay.
And so in Labarga's, what happens in the billing lawsuit with Proskauer is we retain new counsel. Like
okay, and this lawsuit that Proskauer has created to force bankruptcy, and you lose control, and then they try and clear the bankruptcy by using the assets of the firm, and those assets are these patents, which are of great value.
And you don't know anything about those companies because they look and smell like your companies, but none of your shareholders are owners of them.
Right.
They're owned in, these were all done in secrecy. This was all going on behind the scenes. What they were going to do probably to me is bankrupt me, force me out of business.
Yeah, it's all designed for confusion, diversion, and for...
it's a complicated patent scheme to steal patents. Same thing they ran on Friedkin.
Right.
So we get into court with Labarga, and
Labarga is the judge. Labarga is the judge, right? Labarga is the judge.
Labarga is the judge who's now on the Florida Supreme Court. He was at the West Palm Beach Civil Court. And Labarga, and by the way, in the crime syndicate, you get a leg up to the Supreme Court if you really do something great like he did, like throw an election or other things like block me in court.
Right.
So what did he do to me in court? We brought in new counsel, like you said, Stephen Sells out of West Palm Beach. Sells came in, and, he calls some of the evidence Holy Grail against him in a taped message to me that's on my website.
Right.
I mean, this is a clear-cut slam dunk. We depose the lawyers. The lawyers lie through their teeth. They're caught in perjury. Their statements to the bars later don't match up with their deposition statements, creating absolute perjury.
Right.
And so Labarga's got all this information that these guys might be involved in a patent theft, that the attorneys, Proskauer is always representing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So Proskauer is representing themselves against Sells,
Mm-hmm.
and the conflict's apparent, but Labarga is allowing the conflict. We're bringing in evidence that, they've ripped off patents, might be infiltrating the patent office, conspiracy, basically treason against the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And Labarga ends up disarming me of both of my counsels after.
How does he get rid of your counsel?
Showed up at the courtroom for a trial.
How does he get rid of your counsel?
He would listen to that. You love this. Labarga, we were supposed to settle, but we couldn't. So it comes to a trial. Mm-hmm. And at the day of the trial, I show up to a courtroom that's empty and black. I call Sells. He goes, yeah, I just went over there, and I don't know what's going on. The trial was canceled or something. So we'd also brought in another law firm, Schifrin and Barraway, out of Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And they were also representing in this counsel at me, and they had just signed an LOU to represent me in all of these lawsuits against Foley, Proskauer, and everybody. They had signed an LOU on their firm's letterhead to pay me millions of dollars, become a shareholder, and fight the fight against all these lawyers. We thought they were, godsend heroes.
That's a letter of understanding, an LOU?
Yeah, letter of understanding.
Okay.
So they have a signed contract with me to pay me millions of dollars, get a large share of the company going forward, and prosecute all these law firms and lawyers
and those millions of dollars they would earn that in the prosecution of your case.
Right, and they'd actually own a piece of my company. The LOU gives them ownership as shareholders.
Right, so they would be representing a company that they have an ownership interest in.
Correct.
Okay.
And they were taking an ownership interest to represent us, knowing that it would cost them out of pocket millions to take on these law firms.
Right, and they were willing to do that and did that.
After 2 years of researching the documents.
Right, exactly. It took a long time.
Okay, and so they come into the picture, and Labarga says the trial was canceled, gives no reason, which the FBI guy thought was kind of strange, and disarming of my rights, and he schedules a rehearing.
A rehearing of what?
To schedule a rehearing, to reschedule the hearing that was missed.
The hearing that was canceled, they're going to have a rehearing to.
Right, and it wasn't canceled.
Yeah.
He didn't notify anybody, or we went to trial thinking there was no notice, there was no document that,
And this is after your attorneys have prepared for the trial.
Right.
The trial date is set.
Sells had done several years of work.
Right.
Schifrin and Barraway several years.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so Labarga at the rehearing, what had happened was once I signed the LOU, Schifrin and Barraway told Sells, step out of the case. We've got it under control.
Right.
And so withdraws counsel. So at the rehearing,
how did
Sells
get
walked up and said to Labarga, here's my withdrawal as counsel.
How did Sells get paid?
I can't recall.
Okay.
And so Sells put in his withdrawal.
Right. Now you're represented by this Pennsylvania law firm.
Schifrin and Barraway. The very next minute, they walk right past me, and they go up to Labarga and hand him a withdrawal. Well, Sells' withdrawal of counsel says, I'm withdrawing as counsel because Eliot's represented by someone else.
Right.
They walk right past me and hand Labarga another withdrawal of counsel. Never told me they were withdrawing as counsel, and withdrew as counsel.
For what reason? Irreconcilable differences?
No, they said that I was being represented by Sells after they had told Sells to step down.
Okay.
In writing.
Okay.
Okay. And Labarga approves that, leaving me with no counsel.
Okay.
And then he calls me from the gallery and tells me to come up, and I said, hey, I can't represent anybody. I don't know what these companies are all about. I don't know what's going on. Mm-hmm. I wasn't an officer at that point of the companies. Mm-hmm. But he screamed at me to get up there now, or else type thing. So I went up there, and he told me I have 45 days to get counsel. And I said, well, you just got rid of my counsel, and this is a complex case ready for trial. I have 45 days. What are you talking about, dude? Mm-hmm. He wouldn't budge. He ruled, then the attorneys, Sells and Barraway, walked off with all my case files and had all of the case files and wouldn't give them to me during the time I could have appealed and everything else that case. So I got to the court 45 days later in Labarga after I begged for a few more days and everything, wouldn't give it to me. While Labarga knew about the perjuries, had the evidence of the perjuries that Rubenstein, in fact, came to his deposition and said he never heard of Eliot Bernstein and Iviewit companies. And then documents fell out of the sky at his deposition that were faxed to him that said, from Warner Brothers, we checked with Ken Rubenstein, who opined favorably on your patent.
Right.
You know, and Rubenstein was dead at that point. Now, Labarga had that evidence.
Right.
He had Sells telling him. He had Schifrin and Barraway's LOU.
Right. So somebody got to your counsels.
Somebody got to the judge. In fact, Rubenstein, if you read his deposition, is so brazen in his lies that all he keeps saying, even when he's threatened by Sells that failing to answer is against the law in Florida, he says, take it up with the judge.
Yeah.
Real cocky.
Right.
You know, like, we got the judge in our pocket. You could say whatever, you know, I could do whatever I want in this room.
Right.
And he basically tried, I mean, you should read his deposition. It's a classic piece of how lawyers are bad liars and why they're afraid of the courtroom.
Let's get to the Florida bar.
Okay.
Okay.
So Labarga throws the case.
Yeah.
He fixes it.
Right.
Takes his briefcase or boat or whatever.
Yeah.
He tells me, take it up with the Florida bar.
He tells you to take it up with the Florida bar. Okay.
Yeah, I'm like, what are you doing? You just let go of my lawyers? This one's got an LOU. I got the LOU in my pocket.
Right.
I'm like, well, what are you doing? And he's like, take it up with the bar.
Right.
And that was his closing comment. I was unbuckling my pants to give him a moon when the bailiff said that I had such a wonderful case, but not to go to jail over it. But I would have shot him a moon right there to tell him exactly what I thought of him in his court decision and his court antics.
Right.
Because it was beyond belief that a judge could overlook, you know, massive crimes against the United States that were being exposed, crimes in the courtroom that he had firsthand evidence of.
He became a Supreme Court justice.
Yeah,
in
fact, yes, he did. In fact, by Chris, put him in. In fact, Rubenstein wrote Labarga a letter that he had his lawyer, who later ends up in the Florida bar issue, Matthew Triggs, write Labarga a letter saying that I was attempting to harass Rubenstein, who's listed in the Wachovia private placement as Iviewit Patent Counsel, and Proskauer wrote the thing.
Okay.
But they wrote to Labarga saying he didn't know anything, he never billed, he doesn't know who I am, you know, this is a fishing expedition, the whole nonsense. And then in his deposition, he has to admit that he does know Iviewit, and he does know me, and he does, and there's documents showing that all the patents were transferred to him, even though he says that they weren't. And so he's dead, and Labarga has all that information, and this is how they buried the case. Okay. So he sent me to the bar.
To the Florida bar. The judge tells you to go to the Florida bar to report the attorneys who have done this to you. And
take up any grievance with him.
With them, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, I think he told me the Judicial Conduct Committee, which I went to on him.
Well, that's a JQC you're talking
about.
Yeah,
and that's a complete joke, too.
So you can go, he says, go to the JQC, you can complain about me, and go to the Florida bar and complain about the attorneys.
Right.
Yeah,
take it up with them. So we've got it fixed upstairs.
Yeah, that's like sending you, it's like sending you to, I think your example was where you go to the guards, you go to the SS to complain about the guards at the...
at the concentration camp.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Okay. My guest today is Eliot Bernstein, and we're going to be right back with Eliot after this short commercial break. Don't go away. My name is Les Winston, and I host Disbar, the Florida Bar, right here on the Biz in South Florida.
The United States Trustees Program is the largest organized criminal element in the world.
In Florida, all other professionals except lawyers are governed by the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. Only lawyers regulate themselves through the Florida Bar.
Because the Florida Bar is controlling all three branches of government now. We have attorneys in all three branches. There's a system out of control. There's no more check and balance.
This has created a very dangerous good old boys club and a lot of rotten apples.
Sue me.
Tune in each weekday from 2 o'clock to 3 p.m. and listen to stories of individuals who have been affected by the corruption of the Florida bar. We want you to be aware of the problem that we have with this disciplinary agency. Join us every weekday, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. right here on the